All right, great. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this special analyst call and webinar. Thank you for your time. Make yourself comfortable. It's going to be a very rich and I think exciting session that we have here. We have a lot of guests with us. We have our whole research team and our director of brand and creative, Neil Russo. So thank you guys for joining the analyst call. Today, we are going to unveil the State of Crypto magazine on the world's most important use cases that actually crypto assets and blockchain technologies are really enabling a new Cambrian explosion of uses that were not possible since the start of Bitcoin back in October 2008. And we're super excited to really have and provide you guys a clear message with evidence and data and stories that, yes, this asset class is actually significantly used. These are the early innings of the adoption cycle of crypto assets, digital assets, and blockchain technology. But there are 6 main use cases that we're going to walk you guys through to better understand how crypto is actually changing the world, literally. But before that, we want to walk you guys through how the whole magazine actually look like, because you're going to really love it. And without the incredible work of Neil's team, it wouldn't be possible to convey the clearest and insightful messages for people to navigate and understand this asset class. And I want to really thank everyone on the research team at 21 Shares, as well as Neil's team, so the design team, for really providing incredible work for you guys to better understand our asset class. Neil, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and you're going to walk us through the incredible design work that you guys worked on.
Right on. Let's get into it.
Let's get in there. All right.
Beautiful. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who's on this call. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Neil. I'm the director of brand and creative at 21 Co. Also working on projects for 21 Shares. Crypto is something that is difficult for a lot of people to get their minds around. And as a creative designing projects like this, we really strive to simplify these complex ideas as much as possible. We have a system that we use for visuals, but as far as capturing the essence of an idea, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of back and forth. We ask a lot of questions. Some of them are stupid, but the research team is always incredibly kind with their time and with their explanations. With that set up, there's a bit of thinking that goes into a cover itself. Is the criteria is you want something that's striking, you want something that's memorable, but you also want something that is not too complex, because you need to really boil those ideas down. They need to be simplified and digestible and also graphic. You want someone to be able to pick that thing up instead of just looking at it, trying to figure out what it is. You never want your audience to feel stupid. There's a lot of really intense, really smart, really amazing ideas in this issue. How do we choose which one is the one to represent? How do we choose which one is the one that bubbles up to the top? And the short answer for us was, okay, let's try to tell this story in a way that takes everything in an equal way. So we have all of our use cases as apps on a phone. The idea for the phone itself is very much about this device that everybody uses every day. This is not looking into the future. This is looking into the now and how it connects to the blockchain, how it connects to these ideas, and how it connects to the world itself. So that's the basis for how we set up this particular cover. But again, it needs to look graphic, it needs to look interesting, and people are going to want to have to pick it up. So we try to use color, we try to use design, and we try to use ideas that are simplified but still striking. So that's how we came up with the cover.
That's really incredible. And it shows again how tangible crypto can be, especially when we're looking at the phone, and how people can actually use now blockchain-powered applications that they're not even realizing that this is built on an entirely new operating system powered by blockchain technology. And that's really the message here, that for many people, having access to that piece of technology without realizing that they're using the technology is where crypto is headed. So that's a super powerful message, Neil. Absolutely.
Cool.
Let's go through some of the use cases. All right. First one.
All right.
Tell us.
The DEC, the International Hedge Against Wealth Confiscation, that really resonated with us. That this isn't a casino. This isn't a game of chance. This is more strategic. So how do you represent strategic ideas while you're still playing an adversary that is incredibly smart and is very deft at working markets, working bigger ideas? So we thought a chess match. None of us are chess masters, but we hope we positioned the crypto items as having a leg up in this battle. But it is very much a game of skill. It is a game of wit. It is a game of thinking. So it's not about gambling. We're definitely not pulling a lever and hoping for a bunch of cherries to come up. Yeah, that's how we got to this, about the game of finance and all the strategy and smarts that you need in order to win it.
Incredible. Let's go through stablecoins. Tell us more about this one.
All right. So again, it's that device that everyone on this call has at least one. Some people have three or four. And how do you represent the idea of cross-border, of cheap and instantaneous? It's using that device that you will use to send this, but turning it into an ATM. It's international. We've got some flags in there, but it is also about being pegged to the dollar. And we just really wanted to represent that idea that this thing that everybody has is also this carrier, again, going back to what the cover is, where it's connected to this deeper blockchain. It's connected to these bigger ideas, but it is this thing that everybody has and that everybody can use. So that was some of the thinking that went into this particular one.
Very cool. Data storage.
All right. So the idea of a vault and a hard drive is probably this is not the first time that it's been done, but we really wanted to think about it in terms of a broader use case. As you can see our little illustration on the left, we've got a bookcase with all these hard drives and a little cat. That's like my second favorite Easter egg. My favorite one is actually the binary code, which says, if you're looking for an Easter egg, this is it, but it says it in binary. But the approach to this was very much about security and data storage. You have massive amounts of data. You're not going to put it on a thumb drive or something else. You need something that is very secure and that really people can trust. So we wanted to get that sense across. And it's similar with banks, where like that vault, that it's very hard to break into there, especially, well, not if it's like a crime movie or a caper where people are breaking into a vault, but generally speaking, banks don't get robbed in the same way. So it is about that, instilling that sense of security on this digital device.
And what about the ones and zeros that we see here? Is there any specific meaning?
That is, so we did want to denote that this was a hard drive with data in it, but there is an Easter egg in there where it does say, if you can read binary, it says, if you're looking for the Easter egg, you found it. That's what it says in binary. So if for anyone on this call who knows how to read binary, let us know if we got that wrong, because I'm pretty sure we got it right. But it's, again, trying to denote that there is data inside of this secure structure, also with a bit of a wink and a nod.
This is brilliant. Tell us more about digital identity.
Everybody who has an iPhone or even other types of handheld devices, how many times a day does your face get scanned? And it feels secure. It's something that people can recognize, but it is so essential, even though it is a daily, everyday thing. It is such an essential part of all of our online activities. We need to feel secure. We need to be able to trust that our information is not getting stolen, that our finances aren't getting completely taken away. So we just wanted to denote we have this shield. It is very much about the security, but again, on this device that everybody uses every day.
Very cool. All right. And then next up, NFTs.
All right. So there's a sculpture in New York City. I think the artist is Robert Indiana, but I'm not positive, but it says LOVE. And we use that as the inspiration. It's pretty basic, but it's in a cool spot and everybody always hangs out and takes photos near it. And we thought of, okay, there's a message in it. How do we tie this to people? How do we tie this to crypto? And the idea of taking out the music labels or taking out the gallery owners and just having profits go directly to the artists, let's make the artists a part of the art. Let's make them the actual art. So you see that on YouTube, you see that with people selling things on the sidewalks or even like through their own sites. So it is very much about empowering artists to be the art themselves, but also it's not gated. Like, yeah, there's some velvet rope, but it's open. So people can come and access it. So it's a direct line to these artists and to this cryptocurrency. So it's meant to be artists also as art. So I think we nailed this one. I was really happy with the way this one came out.
You guys nailed it. Everyone on the call is nodding. And then last but certainly not the least, forensic science.
So again, this is about a complex idea and how do you sometimes have to take creative license with it, but you also need to really get into the nuts and bolts of what you're trying to show. And we looked at code for blockchain services. We looked at code for smart contracts. And I love code. I think it's a beautiful thing, but it doesn't really tell the story unless you actually understand what that code means. So we took some license and we represented a smart contract as this digital piece on a tablet. But then there's like an old school magnifying glass of what's behind that code. What is the intent? What are the ideas? And how is this all connecting? How is this all hanging together? Because that is one of the beautiful things about blockchain is just seeing all these connections and knowing that everything is in there and you can trust it. So it's just representing that idea in a visual way. So yeah, again, little creative liberties there, but I hope we told the story in a concise way that makes sense.
for us, we really want to make crypto easy, professional, and accessible for everyone. And that really starts with education. That really starts with making sure that people can understand as a class better with evidence and stories. And without further ado, Neil, first of all, we want to thank you so much for the hard work and for your time as well to present the amazing illustrations and graphic design that you guys came up with on the back of basically what Adrian, Lina, and the rest of the research team are going to present in the next few seconds. So first, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. Many people heard about Bitcoin. Adrian, tell us more about the use case of Bitcoin, because I think Bitcoin has become more of a Swiss knife with several use cases, but tell us more about the thesis and the evidence with the use of Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And obviously, when we talk about top use cases, we have to start with the face of the crypto industry, and that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin, in the first place, as we all know, has been created with the intention to really offer an alternative. So an alternative system that kind of acts like a hedge against counterparty risk. So one of its main features, which is obviously its decentralization, meaning that it operates on a global network of computers and nodes where no single entity or authority has control. So all the decisions are made collectively through a consensus. All the transactions are validated independently by all the participants. And ultimately, this ensures its security and resilience without relying on a central entity. And I think this year, Bitcoin clearly showed its true product market fit. I would say the best example is March this year, where we had the banking crisis in the US and the downfall of several banks, which included was First Republic Bank, Silicon Valley, Silvergate, and Signature. And on the back of that, Bitcoin actually rallied over 40%. It was reminding people why Bitcoin was created in the first place. And in the end, it is not your keys, not your coins. And therefore, it's really a hedge against that counterparty risk. In addition to that, Bitcoin is absolutely cementing its position as an emerging store of value and a hedge against currency debasement and political crises. I know most of you always think about Bitcoin in US dollar terms. We all do. But let's take the Turkish lira as an example. And looking at Turkey, arguably the political and economic landscape in Turkey has been quite shaky. But looking at their currency, the Turkish lira has lost a lot of value over the last 3 years. It was actually a 30% drop against the US dollar this year alone. So if we look at the Bitcoin lira chart, we can clearly see that Bitcoin currently stands around an all-time high, or it actually is at an all-time high right now. And what's even more important is that the volume has been increasing significantly over the last year as well. So that shows increased interest and demand for Bitcoin. And obviously this doesn't only apply to Turkey, it also applies to a lot of other countries that suffer from like high inflation and economic instability. So the same if you look at Lebanon, Argentina, Egypt, in all of those countries, we see an increasing demand for a neutral asset like Bitcoin. Now, obviously, there's a caveat, I would say, because one could argue that the lira also lost a lot of value against the dollar, which is true. And the truth is the US dollar still is the world reserve currency. So just looking at the stats, for instance, which are also included in the magazine, according to the BIS, 88% of the 7.5 trillion traded daily in OTC Forex markets in 2022 involved the US dollar. And according to the UN, the United Nations, about half of the 32 trillion global trade market involved the dollar and was invoiced in dollar. So that clearly shows there's still a demand for the dollar. And that's also why stablecoins, meaning US dollar-backed cryptocurrencies, are so popular. And naturally, I think Bitcoin usually, as of today, always comes second or third after gold as a flight to safety.
This is brilliant because it's a good segue to basically the next use case for how crypto is actually changing the world. But to summarize what you just said, we've seen evidence in Lebanon, in Venezuela, in Ukraine of people using Bitcoin as a flight to safety, as a flight to quality. But that can also come in second and third, depending on the risk appetite of the investors. But the clear difference between Bitcoin and the dollar is that Bitcoin, as you mentioned rightfully in the beginning, Adrian, is that Bitcoin is decentralized, censorship resistant, it's a bearer asset, right? Where essentially people can have a less cumbersome experience if they have to, for example, unfortunately flee a country in time of a war, living with, for example, their non-custodial wallet to get to another place that is safe. And we've seen that a lot in Ukraine. We heard that as well recently with what's happening in Israel.
Absolutely. And I think also just to round this up from my side, as you said, in contrast to like centralized stablecoin issuers like Tether or Circle, they still have the right to freeze accounts, which basically exposes investors to counterparty risk. So I think people really must remind themselves that Bitcoin really acts as a public good. And the beauty is it's accessible to everybody, but it's controlled by nobody. And in my opinion, this is a really powerful value proposition in today's age and time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good segue for Carlos, who's been writing and investigating and studying the second use case, which are how now, thanks to blockchain technology, we can send value over the internet like emails beyond Bitcoin, beyond Ethereum with fiat currencies like USD stablecoins. And that's a very important, one of the most important use cases. And I would say this is the killer use case of crypto assets beyond Bitcoin today. Carlos, tell us more about it.
Absolutely, happy to. And it's a good segue indeed. I think that the main takeaway here is that crypto is the next logical evolution between money and the internet, and that blockchain networks such as Ethereum, Solana, and Bitcoin allow us to transfer money as easily as sending an email or WhatsApp, like you would do on a phone, like a simple message. And that's why we believe that crypto is ripe to disrupt the $37 trillion cross-border payment industry. If you look at the traditional finance, at the existing financial system, it is geographically fragmented, and that results in slow, expensive, and really opaque fee structures for cross-border transfers. In the figure that we see in the screen, we can see that wires can cost up to $50, and it can take 1 to 5 business days to arrive. Credit cards constantly charge between 1.5 and 3.5% per transaction. And it takes between 1 to 3 days for the processing company to actually deposit the funds into the merchant's bank account. And for remittances, it is really expensive to send micro payments today. For example, if you want to send $200 remittance from Guatemala to the US or vice versa, the global average of doing that is 6.3%, which is very high and above the 3% target by the UN. And in contrast to that, if you see below, blockchain technology enables us to transfer money almost instantly and very cheaply. For instance, you can see that sending USDC on Solana costs less than a cent. It's almost free if you think about it. And the settlement time is less than 1 second. And the same thing with Ethereum L2s. It costs basically cents and it takes 3 minutes, the settlement time, compared to days in traditional finance. And then with Stellar, which has been carrying some interesting initiatives with on and off ramps around the world, also has a very cheap transaction cost and a very fast settlement time. However, let's get into some of the limitations that are impeding stablecoins to disrupt the cross-border payment industry, because if it's so much better, why is it not mainstream yet? And there are two main reasons why we still haven't reached mainstream adoption. The first is that there is a low internet penetration rate, especially in emerging economies. For instance, to give you a number, in Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, the internet penetration rate is still below 40%. And obviously, the only requirement to transact with crypto assets, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, or USD stablecoins, is to have an internet connection. But if you don't even have that, then you cannot really do that much. So that's the first impediment. And you can see that in countries where the internet penetration rate is already high, such as Mexico, for instance, stablecoins are already leaving their footprint. And so if you see centralized exchange BIT, for instance, in Latin America, processed over $3 billion in remittances last year between the US and Mexico, which is the largest corridor in the world for remittances. And then the second thing that needs to happen for stablecoins to reach mainstream adoption and use for merchant payments is to have robust integrations with the traditional financial system and with existing financial software. Because we have to accept the fact that we cannot just live in a siloed world, and we still need to connect to the traditional world and everything that's happening already in the real world. And so there are already some initiatives that are taking place to get to this next step. For instance, PayPal recently launched USD Stablecoin, citing a shift toward digital currencies. And there are also other instances of crypto native companies doing that work. For instance, Gnosis Pay recently launched a Visa self-custodial card. So the users can use their crypto as they would use their credit card with their bank account. And this is, I think, a good segue to a much wider topic, which is tokenization, right, Eli?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And we're super excited because last week we actually published our global tokenization report looking at the entirety of the asset class, not just for stablecoins, but also we're seeing the early innings of tokenized assets for commodities, asset-backed finance, real estate, equities, etc. And we have basically 7 real-time dashboards so that investors can see the evolution of tokenization over time. The message is that blockchain technology is going to become the back-end infrastructure for several financial institutions, whether they're central banks, private banks, or other type of institutions and corporations, to really upgrade and reduce their capital expenditure and increase their profit margins by reducing the middleman costs to have a more efficient operations. So these are the things that we're seeing today as the early innings of that. Stablecoins are the most important product market fit today with, I believe, a combined market cap of over $150 billion in value. The main one is, of course, Tether with over $80 billion in market cap and value. But we're seeing that more and more institutions, central banks are actually trying to leverage the technology as well. So without further ado, Tom is going to walk us through the dashboard that we created in order for you, the investors, to see in real time the adoption of tokenized assets overall, because this is really a force to be reckoned with. Tom, I'm going to share my screen and you can walk the audience through our significant and important dashboard that many media outlets like CoinDesk, for example, publish a report specifically on our dashboards.
Awesome. Okay. So we are really excited for the launch of this dashboard. So what is the goal of this dashboard is, according to our report, our best case scenario of tokenization can grow to a $10 trillion industry, right? But right now, as you can see from the dashboard, the total tokenized value is still at very early innings. It's around 71 billion. And if we include stablecoins from other blockchains, because this dashboard is built on Dune Analytics, and it only covers mostly EVM-compatible networks, such as Ethereum, BNB Chain, Arbitrum, so on and so forth. But it didn't include one of the largest network, which has a lot of stablecoins issuance on that network, which is called Tron. But aside from that, we're tracking around 80 to 90% of all the assets that has been tokenized on public blockchains. And also you can see that a lot of different products has already been launched on the blockchain as well. Over 82 products that has been launched on public blockchains. And aside from the total AUM of tokenized products, we are seeing only 47 million users that have used tokenized products. And compared to the overall crypto users, which is around 475 million users in the total crypto space, 47 users is 10% of the total crypto number of users. So over the past year, we're seeing a aggressive growth of number of users, thanks to the banking crisis as well, but then and we're still very early. And as Carlos mentioned, stablecoin, especially fiat collateralized stablecoin, is one of the key products of crypto, as it has gained tremendous product market fit. It can be used for global remittances. It can be used in trading, so on and so forth. But aside from stablecoin, even though they are having 96% of the market share, we're seeing a whole list of new innovations that are coming up with this bear market, such as commodities, government securities, real estate, corporate bonds. But it's not just about crypto native crowd, because traditional finance projects and institutional players are actually looking to the blockchain technology, trying to understand how it works and trying to leverage the technology and issue it on different blockchain. And the most popular blockchain right now that has gained a lot of exposure and AUM is Ethereum, because it is the key liquidity hub for all the crypto assets. Most of the trading volume is on Ethereum, most of the liquidity is on Ethereum, and therefore a lot of the institutions and different companies, when they thought about tokenizing assets on chain, they think about Ethereum first. But then we also see other outliers or other use cases such as Stellar, Polygon, Gnosis, and Base. And if we scroll down a little bit, we can see the list of projects that have been tokenizing on public blockchains, such as the largest ones are obviously different fiat stablecoin issuers. But then on the ranking number 6, we're seeing one of the traditional finance player, Franklin Templeton. They have issued their government securities, which is a US Treasury product, on both Polygon and Stellar. And it's worth over 300 million right now on chain. And we also see that other traditional finance players like Hamilton Lane, KKR, they're also tokenized their private funds who securitize this project on the blockchain as well. And so as Simons, which is a technology conglomerate, they also tokenize their corporate bond on the Polygon blockchain via Obligate, this project. This is a very exciting future. And if you want to understand more about the tokenization and you want to keep track of the developments, we also divide it up into different category of assets and products to you in 6 different dashboards. So you can track it in the future with us and see if the number will go to $1 trillion of AUM in the future.
Thank you so much, Tom. This is really significant and super important for the investors to also see in real time the adoption of these different projects and companies and institutions leveraging the blockchain technology. We are going to provide you guys the links to this presentation, of course, as well as the dashboard so that you can actually refer to it as you want to. Next up is Karim is going to present how blockchain technology has went above and beyond to provide the infrastructure for the value transfer of assets or the value transfer of crypto native assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum. But we're seeing that there is now more and more value of blockchain technology that touches basically every single internet service that we know today since actually the launch of TCP/IP and the World Wide Web. Tell us more about how critical is data storage for the industry and for the investors to know.
As Ellie has gratefully introduced this, blockchain is really starting to demonstrate its value in a much bigger and a much broader way than just focusing on finance. Of course, finance has been one of the most paramount and critical implementations of it because it really does hit to the point in terms of settlement efficiency and reduced costs and all of that stuff. But it's really starting to show its value proposition outside. And before I jump in, I think it's really important to understand what is it exactly about blockchain as a superior ledger that makes it very much suitable for this kind of a use case. So what is it essentially? The fact that it is a decentralized and distributed and an immutable database. That's just the way you should think about it. If you want to store your data and you don't want anyone to mess with it, and you don't want it to fall under the control or under the coercion of any malicious actor or any entity that might want to intervene, you do want to have these properties. So that's really important for us to realize because I think it gets overshadowed with finance. We jump straight into the use case. But yeah, this is essentially the infrastructure and the architecture that helps it achieve this objective. With that being said, what does it actually do? How does it actually help the industry? Again, if you want to prevent data loss, you don't want a central entity to have control over your database. If you don't want it to fall under the coercion of censorship, you can't have a single entity that just has a light off switch. And this is exactly what we saw. So in the Russia-Ukraine conflict that happened last year, when the fighting took off, President Putin ordered essentially a directive to shut down any sort of media appearances or any sort of media coverage on what was happening in Ukraine. This, of course, Twitter is the biggest and the most used platform for these kind of things due to citizen investigative journalism. It's usually the way that you would get your primary source of information. And in that regard, Arweave, which is one of the two leading blockchains, so they have their own blockchain, but then they developed a module or a software essentially that was taking data automatically off Twitter based on specific keywords that relate to the conflict, and that it was able to import it automatically to this immutable hard drive. When you're able to do this, it doesn't really matter what kind of directive a dictator or an authoritarian might want, the data will live there forever. We saw the same thing as well in China a few years back, or in Hong Kong more specifically. There was a pro-democracy movement that took off a few years back, and essentially because the Chinese government wasn't as fond of the type of information that was being shared on the platform, they directed the newspaper, which was called Apple Daily, to get shut down. Because of the fact that Arweave offered this alternative database, they were able to digitize the entire newspaper, archive it, and store it permanently on this alternative database. And in that regard, it's really powerful because in times of conflict and in times of extreme uncertainty, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the preservance of information. And that's a really powerful capability to have for humanity. So yeah, this is how it's been used. It's architecture, the backbone that enables it to become a reality. But then, of course, there are certain things that are preventing it from reaching mainstream adoption. I'm not going to spill all the beans here, but some of the limitations that just two of the most pressing ones. First of all, for anyone here, I'm going to just take it a step back. When you have a new social media platform, what prevents you from using this completely brand new social platform that has nothing to do with anything that we see now? It's the fact that it doesn't have strong network effects. The fact that you're not able to replicate and transport your information from your existing servers to this new database. That's exactly what's been happening. Arweave and Filecoin, the two most prominent decentralized data storage solutions, they didn't really have a lot of, I would say, compatibility and connectivity to existing solutions. In that regard, we're seeing a lot of exciting stuff right now. So Arweave has something called R Drive, which is essentially the mobile version of Google Drive. I can attest to how exciting this is because I tried uploading some stuff almost 2 years back, and it was a really difficult process. Like you have to be a full-on nerd or a technical magician in order to understand some of this stuff. Right now, it feels as easy and as intuitive as downloading just a software from Apple or Play Store, and you're able to do this immediately on the go. There's also the other issue of the weak network effects. We've already talked about this. And then there is the issue of intuitiveness. So we talked about how this doesn't really help with connecting with existing softwares. Not just that. Right now, you actually have, because this is a bit technical, but it's not really data storage or storing data in the modern crypto economy. It's not as straightforward as uploading data using Google Drive or AWS or any of these things. It requires a lot more technical steps. And now we have new additional softwares that abstracts these kind of technical intricacies. So just before I wrap up my section, I think there are 2 or 3 important data points that we should absolutely hit on the nail. So just to give some context, data is expected to grow by almost 150 to 170% in 2 years' time. And as I'm sure everyone is aware here, we're going through a lot of times of uncertainty, and you really do need a way to preserve your information, disregarding of where this is happening. So yeah, that's one point to keep in mind. Now, in terms of how we value this market and our enthusiasm towards it, the existing data storage market in the traditional world, it's estimated to be around $240 billion. In comparison to the decentralized storage protocols, it's just at $5.5 billion. So this really shows the expansive room of growth for all of these embryonic protocols. And yeah, I think that gives enough context without spilling too much of what we have as a surprise in the magazine.
And thank you so much, Karim. And the fourth use case is digital identity. We've seen more and more use cases or instances where many people were actually using blockchain technology for trying to build an online identity certified that they are humans to have access to basic needs. And that's beyond data storage. That's actually giving the lifeblood for many people to have access to the most important requirements for them to have access to healthcare, to have access to nutrition, etc. So the next one is Lina. Lina is going to explain how identity is actually broadly used today by more than 4 million people in the world, and why this is one of the most important use cases with blockchain technology as well. Lina, without further ado.
Thank you, Ellie. Yeah, as we can see, blockchains are solving not only old solutions like healthcare and genocides and conflicts that people leave their countries or just leave them behind, leave their documents behind, but it's also solving futuristic problems like deepfake, as you just said, Ellie, and AI or artificial intelligence powered or influenced cyber attacks. So this is a very exciting space to watch. It is still at a very early stage, as you can see here. So the projection of this sector, not non-crypto sector, is only $18.6 billion in 2027. And currently it stands, or it stood last year at 9.5 billion. And now the decentralized identity solutions, they're only representing 0.07% of the total crypto market. But although it's less than 0.1%, more than 4 million people are using only the top decentralized identity solutions. And most of them are using them within the Web3 realms just to authenticate their identity as opposed to cyber attackers or exploiters. So that is really burgeoning in the DeFi and Web3 realms, with emerging use cases linked to the real-world IDs that have been used since 2018, and not by the crypto community or coders and developers, but by refugees who are fleeing, for example, genocides like the Myanmar genocide 2017, where thousands of people flocked to neighboring countries just to find a safe place. But when they found a safe place, they couldn't find food. They couldn't find other IDs. They're just stateless people, helpless, and they don't have food and they don't have anything to authenticate their identities. What did they do? So these people, called the Rohingya refugees, they have a project on Ethereum, a private variant of Ethereum, and they used this network or this project to authenticate thousands of their fellow citizens just to have access to things like food, healthcare, even crowdfunding opportunities and work and jobs. And that has also been replicated in many different geographical locations around the world by agencies like the UNHCR. So it is a very exciting project or exciting space, not only for old problems, like I said, but also for new ones like AI and deepfake and fake news. Going back to the WorldCoin, for example, and how it really pioneered at getting a lot of traction. There has been some legal scrutiny, some preliminary investigations here and there for how they gather information or how they register. The registering practices are not are a bit problematic, since they have something called iris that scans the eye. And this caveat or this problem can be solved through standardization. So this sector is in dire need for so many things that I list down in the magazine, and for the brevity of time, I only want to shed light on this problem, which is the global standard. They need a global standard to standardize how they gather information, how they authenticate people's identities without violating them. And that is something I can definitely see in the next 10 years, not so soon, but yeah, next 10 years.
And that's a very powerful use case, because now we're seeing that blockchain technology has been used today as a standard to transfer value over the internet. We're seeing the early innings of storing information and knowledge of evidence of war and conflicts on the internet, thanks to the blockchain of Arwe, for example. And of course, that this is not financial advice. And now we're seeing that there is an expansion of the total opportunity, as Lina mentioned, with the fact that blockchain can be used as the standardized mechanism and tool across the internet to fight against social engineering, to fight against fake news, and of course, fake identities as well. And that's a really powerful concept. I think regulation would be very important to keep an eye on that because it has to be globally accessible to some extent. It has to be also government approved. But this is an exciting space to watch for sure. Tom, let's talk more about the misconception of NFTs. Many investors think that NFTs are JPEGs and photographs of monkeys, and that very similar to the early days of the internet, people thought that all the internet websites were just like pets.com and all the other companies that failed back in 2002, 2003. So tell us more about that specific misconception and why actually NFTs are not about these JPEGs, but they're more about the standardized protocol that exists underneath it, which is the ERC-721. So the standard for enabling the, I would say, empowerment of revenue and over interesting innovations that we see with NFTs. So tell us more about that misconception so that then you can talk about the evidence in the story with NFTs.
So when we talk about NFTs, we oftentimes are also referring to the underlying technology or token standard, which is called ERC-721, as Ellie mentioned. Why is it so special of this standard that we're super excited about? It's not just because it can be used as monkey pictures, right? Of course, it has value, a representation of certain types of communities and so forth. But the more important thing is the non-fungibility part of this token standard. And why is it important? As it allows and enables more use cases built leveraging this non-fungibility, such as a lot of different real estate projects are actually using NFTs to tokenize the real estate on the blockchain. Previously, we already seen that real estate being tokenized on Ethereum has been sold via OpenSea, which is one of the largest NFT marketplaces. And therefore, we can see that NFT, the non-fungibility is not just about monkey pictures. It's also about tokenization. It can be also about identity, as Lena mentioned. It can be also about different types of personnel information like credit scores, certificates, and so on and so forth. And what we want to focus here today as we want to understand how NFT is helping musicians and artists to gain back their revenue from their intermediaries. And according to a statistic by Citigroup, percent of the musicians' revenue is actually captured by the intermediaries. They actually gain back over 98% of the revenue from royalties and from the secondary sales as well. And as of 2023 August, we have seen that NFT volume has grown tremendously. It has reached 82 billion cumulative volume, and it has also paid out over 2 billion worth of royalties. And if we're looking at the NFT marketplaces and NFT projects, obviously it's not just about crypto native crowd. It's also about companies and adoption from the real world use cases, such as some brands that we're super familiar with, like Nike, Gucci, and some of the musicians that we also heard of as well, such as the Chainsmokers, Nas, Freela. They also benefit from the NFT royalties that are paid out via primary and secondary sales. Obviously, the numbers here is relatively low, but then it is shown that it is a cool experiment and that potentially it can become a part of something bigger in the future. But obviously, there are some hurdles before we reach that chasm. One of the key issue or challenges that we're facing right now is NFT is still hard for musicians and artists to understand and use that for their work. So that we need better education, we need better onboarding so that they can ship their work seamlessly to the blockchain without needing to understand and learn a lot of complicated stuff. And another thing is the user side. Users still need a lot of hurdles, such as need to learn how to use a MetaMask wallet, self-custody wallet in order to interact with different applications. And therefore, when it comes to music application, it is relatively harder for existing users to port from, for example, like Spotify. It's easy to use. going to use a wallet to sign in, right? So definitely, if you want to capture more crowd and existing users, definitely we need to put more effort to improve the user experience in the long run.
And I couldn't agree more. And that's why the message is clear, is that many investors and people in the community think that NFTs are dead. But really, one of the things that we're really focusing on for us is looking at the underlying technology, the underlying token standard, and what are the use cases, the Cambrian explosion of innovation that we can see out of that. So the first step was to attract many people with JPEGs, but JPEGs are not actually about NFTs. It is the end product. But the underlying technology itself is enabling now the empowerment of revenue for multiple stakeholders within crypto, but also outside of crypto as well, for musicians and artists, as well as over sectors like real estate as well, credit scores, that underneath that are using the actual token standard for these JPEGs. So let's go through the last use case, and I hope you guys are enjoying so far the session. Carlos, tell us more about the last use case, about how forensic science has gone through another level thanks to the transparency of blockchain technology, and most importantly, how the transparency of blockchain technology has saved billions of dollars from hacks and technological vulnerabilities that actually is not possible with siloed systems that traditional finance actually is leveraging upon.
Absolutely. So one of the main misconceptions about crypto that has been demystified over the years is that it's regularly used for criminal purposes. But when you look at the actual data, Chainalysis, which is a forensic crypto company, found that only 0.24% of crypto's total volume in 2022 was actually used for illicit purposes. And beyond that, as Ellie mentioned, the inherent transparency of the blockchain, in which Bitcoin, Ethereum, and many others rely on, allows every transaction to be traced to a degree that it is impossible in traditional finance. To give you a concrete example, the US government has seized at least 250,000 Bitcoin worth over $5 billion from multiple hacks and illicit activity from the past, and is currently one of the largest Bitcoin holders due to this transparency that the blockchain provides. And what's even more impressive, I would say, is that leveraging that same transparency, the research team at 21 Shares has actually been able to put a dashboard that tracks in real time the holdings of the US government, because we can see the transactions taking place in real time on the blockchain. However, this transparency is obviously not all flowers. It's also a double-edged sword, because even though it is good for the system as a whole, at the individual level, it does raise some concerns, especially privacy concerns, because you don't want to interact with a system essentially that enables you to see every information. You wouldn't want anyone to see your bank account in real time every time you perform a transaction. So this is some of the challenges that crypto must overcome in the coming years with privacy technology such as zero-knowledge proofs to enable individuals to transact privately while still preserving the transparency of the blockchain and the system as a whole.
I just wanted to show the audience that the Wall Street Journal has been using our dashboard that you created on the US government's holdings of Bitcoin. As you can see, they have $5 billion worth of Bitcoin. And of course, they mentioned our company, 21Co, and they hyperlinked the dashboard that you mentioned previously, where you can see in real time the asset allocation, or I would say the seizure of the US government of around $5.5 billion. And that's about less than 1% of the entire amount of Bitcoin created since January 3rd, 2009. So they're not actually controlling the entire supply of Bitcoin. That's a very important misconception to fight against. And then you can see here the latest transaction that happened from the wallets identified publicly of the US government. And the last transaction happened actually a couple of months ago on the 12th of July.
Absolutely. I think that wraps up the use case of crypto's transparency and how it enables forensic science to scale to another level.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you guys can see, we are looking at this asset class in a very different lens. But the message is clear. Crypto is not speculative. Crypto is used broadly by several people around the world. And this is a really powerful message. We're already at time, so unfortunately we have to end this webinar, but it was super helpful and we received an amazing feedback about your design. Neil, so Dominic said that they love your design, so please let Neil know. Absolutely amazing work.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for having me. This has been a lot of fun. It's great to hear everyone else's context around all of these sections as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you, research team. Bye-bye.